For me, that support aspect is so key, because yes, you're building and you're working on your own projects, your own initiatives, the things that you're passionate about. So for her, it's teaching and going that route and developing her craft. For me, it's the entrepreneurial side, it's the writing, continually looking for opportunities to progress. But it's the coming together piece. You don't necessarily have to share the same passion, but because your values align, because you equally want the other person to succeed in what they're doing and you feel pride when they do that, there's a shared commonality between you. Let's get it. That's right. CJ Writes. What's happening, people? This is CJ Writes, aka CJ Lloyd Webley. In this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the benefits I feel come from being a married entrepreneur, freelance writer. So there's a lot of synergy with being a writer and also being an entrepreneur. Both very flexible roles, but also require a lot of your time and dedication to specific tasks. So writing, you have to spend a lot of time focusing on scene breakdowns and getting the narrative clear in your head and making sure that's coming out on paper. Usually the first draft is never the best, but there's always some nuggets in there, some gems that you can work with. And then in the entrepreneurial space, there are so many different tasks that you probably just can't be bothered to do, but they're so important for the functionality of the organization. So I started off running an organization called Sorrel Park, where I went into schools and essentially taught creative writing to children, particularly those that were from disadvantaged backgrounds. Now, there's a whole kind of backstory into how I got into the schools and how I knew what to say to get paid ultimately, but I'll talk about that in another video. I'm going to focus on why I think there are some great benefits to being married, and particularly for me as someone who does have a flexible role and I spend a lot more time at home than my wife does, because she's a teacher and she works, I don't know what hours you would say, but I guess you could say like technically 9 to 3, 8 to 3 maybe, but I think she does like something like 5 to 9, which is a whole different thing. There's actually a podcast that I did with her, which is on my Black Pounds podcast, so you can check that out, and she talks about her experience. The idea of marriage just started to make sense to me as and when I got into a relationship with Amelia, because she was always very focused on her career and what she wanted to do. So that made my life a lot easier, because we weren't both going on that journey of discovery in that sense. Like, I had to really very much figure out how I was going to make this transition from employment to self-employment work, where she didn't have to go on that journey, because she very much knew once she graduated she was going to find a teaching job and just be pretty set in that. I guess one of the benefits for me was that she was very driven in her own right, so it just gave me a lot of time to think about my own ideas and what I really wanted to do, because of course the work that I do is not as clear cut. It's a lot of trial and error, seeing what works, figuring out how you're going to generate income from a lot of the work that you do. Piecing it back to Sorrel Park, I think one of the things that was very difficult starting out was, I said I was going to talk about this in another video, but I'll just talk about it now because it does tie in with all of this. One of the things that was very hard for me at that particular point, I had this ambition, had this idea to run a business. The whole backstory of going to London, getting a job, and then realizing it was taking too much of my time and I wasn't able to do the creative stuff, that was what led me into the entrepreneurial space. So I wanted to utilize my skills as a writer and use that to help inspire young people to do creative writing. I feel like there weren't particularly people that looked like me that were going into schools saying, come on guys, let's all write plays, and doing it in a way that was actually genuine, because I love the theatre, I love what the environment brings, and I love the stories that can be told in that space. But I think it's very much not something that is pushed really, particularly as a career option, but it doesn't even have to be that. But just knowing that all these young people have so many amazing stories inside of them that just weren't being pulled out of them. I mentioned it in another video that I only really figured out the whole playwriting thing once I got to university. So I started to think, imagine if there were young people that we could reach before they even got to secondary school, And whilst they're in secondary school, that's still very young to realise dreams and aspirations. So I just had this idea that I wanted to help young people through writing. And so I very much thought, okay, when I came back from Birmingham, I'm going to try and get into some schools. I'm going to pitch this idea. And obviously I knew that there must have been schools that were struggling to get young people to engage with writing, particularly boys, and more specifically young black boys, trying to get them to enjoy writing and things like that. That must have been quite difficult for schools to be able to do that. And I knew that there was a niche there. I knew there was something that the schools would be interested in, but I didn't necessarily know how to pitch that to them in a way that would be tangible. I wasn't necessarily that fussed about whether I did it during the school day or whether it was a after school club or anything like that. I actually favoured the after school club idea because I felt that I'd have a bit more freedom and flexibility. But then there were the whole complications about staffing. So obviously you have your own DBS, but schools usually have a policy where there's another staff member in the room at the time and all of that, which is great because it's obviously providing more protection for you and the students. But those were complications that I didn't necessarily consider prior to pitching the business idea. So I think I spent about 4 or 5 months trying to come up with this idea, and because Amelia worked in the school, she was able to guide me on what sorts of things SLT, so the senior leadership teams, would be looking for. There's certain terminology that they would want you to use if you were coming in so that they can use it as a tick box, really. So that was all stuff that I started to put into my business plan. You know, I started to ask questions. What are the things that these schools would want? What is the thing that's really going to get them excited about the prospect of someone like me coming in and delivering a program for them? So that's exactly what I did. I wrote a whole kind of, I think, 6-page business plan. I think I did it. I found Prince's Trust and I was working with them for a little while on it, and I did this whole 6 to 10 page business plan, just talking about I was going to sell merchandise, I was going to do a tailored school program, so in school and then after school program. So it was all very much reliant on me. So if I was running late and things like that, it was going to be very difficult to manage. But I was very optimistic, and I knew that it could potentially go somewhere if I just knew how to pitch it. So she sat down with me, she went through all the terminology and things that I might want to use in my pitch when I go into the schools. I was very specific, and for me, what I didn't want to do was go into the school and kind of pitch to say I can help you with the curriculum and help the students that way, because although I had some experience in teaching, I didn't want to be a teacher. If I wanted to be a teacher, I would have gone and done the training. I would have gone that route, but I didn't want to be a teacher. So I was very conscious that I didn't want to go into school and start doing the teacher's job. So my thing was all about using creativity, and that creativity then getting children more comfortable with writing and putting their ideas on paper, because a lot of children do struggle with the idea of getting it wrong. So for me, it was about removing those barriers. Actually, it's not about right and wrong, it's about getting your ideas down first, and that's something then for the teachers to work with, and so on and so forth. So that was my idea. So I remember one of the first meetings I went into the school, and I said, okay, this is what I'd like to do. And I remember I was with I think a deputy head teacher or someone from the senior leadership, and they said, yeah, that just sounds absolutely fabulous. Okay, brilliant. When can you come in? And I was kind of like, okay, like this isn't a volunteer service. Like, can we talk funds here? So I just had to say, yeah, this was the very first one actually. So I said, yeah, you know, I'm very happy to come in and do it. Now I know that schools are very tight with their budgets and whatnot. I know that funding is very difficult at the moment, and different types of schools, alternative provisions, state schools, academies and whatnot, all schools have very different funding streams that they can access. And some schools have obviously more pupil premium students, so that means they have more pots of money to work with. So this is all stuff that I've picked up from my wife, but as I've gone through the process and as I've done other projects as well, I start to understand a little bit more about the landscape of the schools. So this particular school, the people that I was meeting with, they didn't really talk much about the money side of things. So I started to get a bit, you're not trying to pay me, are you? And so they were happy to have the program, but when it came to that payment side of things, it was a whole different ball game. So I learned from that experience, and then the next time I went into schools, I made it very clear that this isn't a volunteer initiative. Like, I'm trying to get paid for this. I gotta put food on the table. So lo and behold, I worked on my pitch going into schools, and I ended up getting into like 6 or 7 schools in the first year, which was amazing. And it just showed that things were starting to move in the right direction. But the reason I say that is because, one, it was great to have that support network there. And actually were we married at that time? I think we were engaged at that point. So there was a building anyway together, but we weren't actually married at that point. But obviously when we transitioned into the marriage, I was working in quite a few schools. So then it was just about utilizing her experience to perfect the pitch that I had or wanted to develop. So the whole thing for me about being an entrepreneur and a writer was support. And sometimes when you're going on that entrepreneurial journey, or when you want to be something that's outside of the norm, it's not always easy to get that support. But for me, what I really valued and what I still value is that I do have that. And at some point, she is a bit camera shy, so she wouldn't want to be here. But at some point, I'll try and get her on. I'll try and get her on to CJ Writes and share her perspectives. But like I say, in the podcast, she does talk a little bit about it. But for me, that support aspect is so key, because yes, you're building and you're working on your own projects, your own initiatives, the things that you're passionate about. So for her, it's teaching and going that route and developing her craft. For me, it's the entrepreneurial side, it's the writing and continually looking for opportunities to progress. But it's the coming together piece. You don't necessarily have to share the same passion, but because your values align, because you equally want the other person to succeed in what they're doing, and you feel pride when they do that, there's a shared commonality between you. So that's something that often gets overlooked. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about being in the marriage context, is that you have that security. Like, she's been there from before I was doing Black Pounds, and before I was getting decent money to speak at events and getting commissions to write and things like that. She was there way before that. So to see how things have progressed, it means that there's a humble element that comes into it on my part, because I can't forget where I've come from and where she's helped me get to. But also on her part, it's obviously seeing me doing what I've always wanted to do, and being actually able to achieve that. That's something special as well, and vice versa. She's achieving things at a very early age as well. So it's very inspiring, and it's great to be able to support someone else. Sometimes I might be working on something. I'm not actually too bad these days with working and staying up. I tell a lie, I did go to bed at like 1 o'clock like 2 days ago, but that was because I had a deadline. If it's not a deadline or something like that, and the problem with me, and I've always been like it, like I work better under pressure, so it can be quite difficult sometimes. But I don't do it all the time, but there are times where I will be up to like 1 trying to get this deadline submitted, because I always want to make sure that it's tight and that it's where it needs to be. So that was probably the only time I've done that in the last couple of months. She just lets me do that because she knows that it's not all the time. Like, if I was doing that all the time, we'd have a bit of a problem, but it's like the occasional thing, and then I just explain, oh, I had a deadline and whatnot. So that accountability factor, again, is really key, because if I didn't have that, I probably would just be staying up till all kinds of hours in the morning, and that just throws off my whole routine. Like, I love getting up in the morning around 5, half 5, going to the gym, getting that out, going for a jog, lifting some weights, and then I'm ready to kickstart the day. That's my routine. But I know if I wasn't in a marriage context, there wouldn't be that accountability there. There wouldn't be someone saying, oh, you need to get your sleep and whatnot. So there's that mutual care there as well. So that's another thing that I think is really important. And I think tying it all together, it's that sense of purpose. When I entered into the marriage, I knew that this was a lifetime thing for me. Like, it wasn't something that I just woke up one day and said, yeah, I'm going to do that. It was a process over time. The support that she's given me, the times where she's just listened to me rant about things that have gone wrong, like when I got rejected from like 20 interviews in London and I just couldn't understand it. Like, she was that listening ear. So now we're in the marriage context, it's given me a new sense of purpose, to know if I just continue on in the same vein that I am now, working on my projects, doing my mentoring, doing my different businesses and keep coming up with ideas and different projects and initiatives, which is what I really enjoy to do. I like to hop from different projects and get things done. So if I can just continue on in the same vein, then if our purpose is just to keep building and reach our potential, then that will inevitably happen, because we're there continually supporting each other, and our aspirations are not necessarily about having millions and millions of pounds. Of course, it's nice to have lots of money, but our thing is about, if I can generate income doing the things that I enjoy and it's allowing me to live a sustainable life that is quite flexible. I like to be able to do different things at different times if I need to. So if we're getting enough income that allows us to do that, then that's a win for us. So I think the benefit, the ultimate benefit of being a married entrepreneur and writer for me is having that support and that system that keeps you accountable and keeps you grounded. A little bit of a longer video today, and I think I probably could have spoken longer, to be honest, but if you've enjoyed it, please drop a comment below. Let me know who is your accountability partner. It doesn't necessarily have to be your wife or husband, it could be a friend. Who is that person that keeps you grounded? So yeah, hope you've enjoyed the video. Until next time, peace and love. Take care.